Magnolia Park, Asheville. 4:47 on a Thursday, the last week of September. Adeline Caro sat on a bench in a gray suit with her phone pressed to her ear, listening to her COO tell her the third quarter was about to come apart. 10 steps away, under a maple already going amber at the edges, her 8-year-old daughter Hazel stood very still, both hands wrapped around a small wooden rabbit. A man in a faded green flannel knelt by the swing set, sawdust on his wrist. He set a hand-carved squirrel on the crossbar, then tapped the wood 3 times short, even deliberate, and went back to his wrench. Hazel turned her head. For 14 months, she had been knocking 3 times on every wooden surface in their house, and no one knew what it meant. This stranger had just done the exact same thing. Adeline lowered the phone. She watched her daughter walk across the wood chips and pick up the squirrel. "If she keeps it," the man said, not looking up, "I've got another rabbit at the workshop. 2 of them shouldn't be alone." Hazel opened her mouth. Her throat moved. No sound came out. But she crossed back to the bench and tapped 3 times on the wood beside her mother's hand. Adeline didn't know that Daniel had taught their daughter that rhythm when she was 3. 1, 2, 3. Asterisk. I love you. Asterisk. Adeline sat frozen. She didn't know what the 3 knocks meant. Daniel had never told her. She only knew it was the thing Hazel did, and she had told the doctors not to push the girl on it after Vale had called the habit an unconscious resistance pattern. The man in the flannel set his wrench down and lowered himself onto the grass. He didn't move closer. He never looked at Hazel for more than 3 seconds at a stretch. He told her his name was Wes, said he was a carpenter, made instruments and playthings for the parks. He didn't ask her name. Hazel took 1 step closer. She pointed at the swing chain. It was still squeaking. "Yeah," he said. "I know. The bushings are old. I'll change them out next week." He held the wrench out to her, handle first. She took it. She held it for 11 minutes while he measured the new chain length, and she didn't speak, but she stood next to him while he worked. Adeline watched from 4 meters back. Her heart was loud in her own ears. She didn't dare move closer. She was afraid of breaking something she didn't yet understand. At 5:38, the sun dropped behind the ridge. Wes stood up and brushed the dirt from his jeans. He told her he had to get back to the workshop because the walnut he had drying needed to come in before the dew. Hazel handed back the wrench. He didn't say goodbye. He just tapped 3 times on the swing's crossbar, answering the rhythm she had given him on the bench, and walked toward the gate. Hazel stood and watched him go. She didn't cry, but she didn't let go of the squirrel. That night, in the Halverson Tower downtown, Adeline took an emergency meeting with Dr. Preston Vale. He came in cashmere and certainty, holding a new schedule. "This is regression," he said, after she described the playground. "The 3-knock habit is a fortress she's building. That man, however well-meaning, reinforced disordered behavior. We need to escalate. 3 sessions a week, 90 minutes each, beginning Monday. No parental observation." "Why no observation?" He gave her his professional smile. "Your presence gives her an emotional escape route. She has to learn the voice belongs to her, not to you." She signed. She got home at 11. Hazel was already asleep, both wooden animals tucked against her chest. On the nightstand, for the first time in 14 months, there was a drawing 2 carved animals, standing beside a man with no face, a green flannel where his shirt should be. Adeline sat on the edge of the bed. She put her hand on her daughter's forehead. She whispered, but not to Hazel. "I don't know if I'm doing this right, Daniel." 11 floors up at Halverson, Tessa Marlowe was pushing a medication cart down the pediatric corridor. She stopped at the treatment board. Hazel's name had been added under a new line, *Vale, P. High-intensity protocol, HB, 1,247 demonstration case, *. Tessa's hand went tight around the cart's bar. She took out her phone. She scrolled to a number she hadn't dialed since August of 2023. Halloway. W. Her thumb hovered. She put the phone back. Not yet, but she took a screenshot of the board. Saturday morning, Adeline drove to Magnolia Park without an appointment. She told herself she just needed to get Hazel out of the house. Hazel sat in the back seat, the rabbit and the squirrel in her lap. Wes was installing the handrail on the slide ladder. He saw the Range Rover. He didn't react. Hazel got out and walked straight to him, no glance back at her mother. He had a small owl already carved, sitting on his toolbox. He picked it up and held it out flat on his palm. Her name's Birch. Think it suits her? Hazel took the owl. She didn't speak, but she tapped twice on its body. Not 3, 2. Wes paused for half a second. In the acoustic yes-no system in his book, 2 beats meant times no. Asterisk. 3 meant times yes. Asterisk. He had written it in Chapter 7 of Times, Sound Before Speech Times, in 2019. This child was using his protocol without knowing it, which meant someone had taught her. He took the owl back, turned it in his hands, and added small tufts at the ear with his pocket knife. He passed it back. How about now? 3 taps. He nodded once. Good. Birch it is. From the bench, Adeline saw none of the detail. She only saw that her daughter stayed for 47 minutes. When the light began to thin, Wes walked toward her, stopping at 3 meters. I won't ask what's wrong with her, he said. You don't have to tell me, but if you bring her on Saturdays, I'll be here. I'm not a doctor. She nodded. She didn't tell Vale. Monday morning, her assistant brought a wrapped book to her desk. From her father, Robert Halverson, retired now and quiet in Hendersonville. The note read, asterisk. Read this before you sign anything else with the Behavioral Institute. Dad. Asterisk. She unwrapped it. Asterisk, sound before speech. Treating pediatric mutism through acoustic bridging. Asterisk. By Wesley Halloway, MS. CCC, SLP. She opened the front page. The dedication read, asterisk. For Iris and Margaret, the 2 I did not listen to in time. Asterisk. She turned to the back jacket. The author photograph was from 2019. Younger, a blazer, the same eyes. The man fixing her swing set was the foremost speech-language pathologist in the country on selective childhood mutism. The man whose method was taught at 31 teaching hospitals. The man Vale had cited 23 times in his dissertation to discredit. Vale had built a career arguing against him. Adeline stood and walked to the window. Pack Square below, people going about their afternoons. She put her palm flat against the glass. She called Tessa in. Do you know a Wesley Halloway? Tessa stopped at the door. She closed it carefully behind her, walked to the chair, and sat down without being asked. Yes. I worked with him at Greenwood Memorial in Charlotte from 2015 to 2022. He was the best teacher I ever had, and the one Halverson should never have touched again. What does times again times mean? Tessa looked at her, then at the window. In 2022, Greenwood Memorial signed a clinical trial agreement with a startup pharma called Lyrinex. They were developing a so-called speech inducer for trauma mutism. Hadn't passed FDA Phase 3. Wesley refused to enroll any of his patients. He went to the North Carolina Medical Board with internal documents. Vale's signed protocol, the dosing schedules, the consent forms parents weren't shown. Vale and Greenwood's general counsel struck back the same week. They filed a countercomplaint accusing him of breach of patient confidentiality and unauthorized release of clinical records. The board panel sided with Greenwood. They suspended his SLP license for 24 months. The Lyrinex agreement was quietly buried instead of investigated. The fight ran most of the next year. They were $1 million to $4 million into legal fees by the summer. Margaret killed herself in August of 2023. Iris drowned at Lake Lure 2 weeks later while she was staying with his parents. He hasn't practiced since. Silence stretched between them. Greenwood Memorial Charlotte, Tessa said. Halverson acquired it in January of 2024. You're the current owner of the institution that destroyed him. Adeline sat down. She hadn't known. Her father had signed that acquisition while she was still in mourning for Daniel. She drove to Riverside Drive that night without calling. The light was on in the workshop. The sound of a hand plane carried through the door. She stood outside in the drizzle, the book under her arm, an envelope in her hand. He looked up. He recognized her not from her face, but from the Halverson logo on her bag the week before. He set the plane down. Halverson Pediatric. I've been waiting for this. She walked in and put the book on his workbench. She set the envelope beside it. That's your book. That's a check for $50,000 from my mother's estate, not from Halverson. Because I'm the current owner of Greenwood Memorial. I didn't know when I signed the acquisition. I'm sorry. I'll leave you alone if that's what you want. He looked at the envelope. He didn't touch it. I don't need your money. I know. I needed to do this anyway. He pushed the envelope back across the bench. You want me to forgive you? I don't. My wife killed herself because of media pressure, and $1.4 million in legal fees Greenwood put us under. My daughter drowned while I was sitting in a disciplinary hearing instead of at the lake like I'd promised her. Money doesn't fix any of that. She nodded. She didn't argue. She put the envelope back in her bag. She told him about Hazel, Daniel, Mason, the accident, the 14 months, the 3-knock habit no one had decoded. She told him about Vale and the high-intensity sessions starting Monday. He listened. When she got to the 3 knocks, he set his coffee down. When does she do 3? When she sleeps. When she's afraid. When she wants me to understand something. And 2? When she refuses food. When she shakes her head. I thought it was just a thing she'd made up. He was quiet for a long while. That's the acoustic yes-no protocol from Chapter 7 of my book. 1-2 means no. 1-2-3 means yes. I wrote it in 2019. Someone taught her. She stared at him. Daniel, she whispered. My husband. He was a medical malpractice attorney. What was his name? Daniel Caro. Caro and Associates. Wes set both hands flat on the bench. He stared at the grain of the wood for a long moment before he could speak. Daniel Caro was the lawyer who represented me before the North Carolina Medical Board in 2022, pro bono. He read my book to prepare. He lost Vale, and Greenwood had too many people on the panel, but he kept it from going criminal. Vale wanted me prosecuted for the records I'd taken to the board. Daniel argued whistleblower protection. She put her hand to her mouth. Daniel had never told her any of it. We stayed in touch after, Wes said. Letters. Occasional emails. He was the only one who kept reaching out after Margaret. After Iris. He told me once he had a daughter that he was teaching her my method, with knocks because she liked rhythm. He never used her name in writing. I didn't know her name. Her name is Hazel. Adeline sat down on the workshop sofa. Her hands shook in her lap. The room smelled of cedar and linseed. He stood, poured her a glass of water from a jar on the shelf, and set it next to her without comment. Saturday, he said. The park. I'm not a doctor. I'll still be there. And Monday? Vale's session? He sat across from her on a stool. He didn't blink. Cancel it. I'll lose Halverson. The board has been waiting for me to slip. My father warned me when I took the chair you're not even 2 years in. One mistake and they replace you. The Vale contract is on a quarterly review. If I pull Hazel from the protocol now, with no clinical justification on file, they'll read it as personal feeling overriding fiduciary judgment. There are 3,000 other children in the network. I don't get to be only her mother in this chair. He nodded slowly. He didn't argue. Then we find a way that doesn't cost you the network. But Monday's session has to be the last one. You'll see what compelled response does in real time, and after that, the right angle will be obvious. She picked up the glass of water with both hands. She drank. She didn't cancel. She couldn't. Not yet. Not without grounds the board couldn't overturn. Her father had warned her when she took the chair. Asterisk, you're not even 2 years in. One mistake, and they replace you. Asterisk, Robert Halverson had built the network from a single clinic in Boone. He didn't want his daughter to be the one who lost it. Monday morning, she drove Hazel to the Behavioral Institute, room 3B. The camera was off, on Vale's standing protocol. She waited in the corridor. Inside, Vale began the compelled response sequence. The girl had to produce a phoneme to be released from a holding posture. Hazel cried for 22 minutes. Vale wrote in his notes, asterisk, full effective response, significant progress, asterisk. When it was over, Hazel was completely silent. Worse than before. In the parking garage, when Adeline buckled her in, Hazel tapped twice on the window. Asterisk. No, asterisk. Just 2. That night, Adeline drove to the workshop without calling. She told him. He stood with his back to her at the bench while she got to the part about the crying through the door. His hand closed, white-knuckled on the edge of the wood. He was holding something back. He turned. Compelled response on a child 14 months into trauma mutism violates APA Ethics Code 3.04 and Standard 8.04. Vale knows. He did this at Greenwood. The first patient was a 7-year-old boy named Toby Reeves. The boy killed himself in 2023 at age 9 after 14 months of intensive sessions. The file was sealed by Greenwood's general counsel. She stared at him. "You have proof?" "I have memory. Toby was my patient before Vale moved him onto the Lyranex protocol against my recommendation. Physical proof, sealed or destroyed." She sat down on the sofa. She was shaking. Vale is preparing Hazel as the flagship case for House Bill 1247. It's an expansion of Medicaid coverage to include compelled response therapy as a reimbursable pediatric treatment. The vote is in December. He's going to present her to the legislative committee. Wes sat down across from her. That's why he took her. She's the CEO of Halverson's daughter. If she succeeds under his protocol, the bill passes. $200 million a year in his column, and Lyranex's. "Quiet. I need an expert witness," she said, "to kill the Behavioral Institute contract internally, to stop HB 1247, to get Hazel out." He shook his head. "I can't be that. My license came off suspension in March of 2024, but I never reinstated. If I file, I have to appear before the medical board, and Vale sits on the review panel. He will block me. He has been preparing for that day for 3 years. Is there another way?" He looked toward the window. "There's one path I keep coming back to. You'll hate it. Say it, Hazel. Not now, not in front of a board, and not under any pressure. But 6 months from now, with the right protocol, she could be the cleanest possible witness against Vale's method, a child the system tried to break who came back her own way. The settlement clock on the class action runs 3 years. By the time it gets to the merits, she'd be ready, if she chose." She stood up. "I'm not building any version of my daughter into a future witness. Not in 6 months. Not in 6 years. Find me another way." He didn't push. "Then we find another way. Give me until Sunday." At the door, she stopped. "Did Daniel ever talk about me?" He looked at her. He said his wife was the strongest person he knew. He said if anything ever happened to him, you'd do the right thing. You'd just need time to find it. She stood at the door a long moment. Then she nodded and left. Wednesday morning, Tessa came to her office at 7, before the building opened. She had an old leather case with her. "I've thought about this for 3 days. I'm going to give you what's in here, but you have to understand the cost." She set 3 things on the desk. A flash drive labeled with the date, March 14th, 2022, an audio recording of a Vale session at Greenwood with Toby Reeves. Tessa had been the night nurse on duty. She had recorded it on her own phone. Toby cried for 38 minutes. On the tape, Vale's voice said, "Asterisk. We push until phonation. The board needs results before quarterly review. Asterisk." A photocopied medical file. Toby's transfer order from Wesley's protocol to the Lyranex protocol over the written objection of the boy's mother. A screenshot of a text message Vale had sent the previous Friday. Asterisk, room, 3B, Hazel. No recording. HB, 1247 demo prep. Asterisk. Adeline opened the drive on her laptop. After 30 seconds of audio, she closed it. She couldn't listen to the rest. "Tessa, why didn't you give this to anyone in 8 years?" "Because of my son." Tessa folded her hands on the desk. "Eli is 24. High-functioning autism. He lives because of Halverson Adult Services. I live because of Halverson Health Insurance. I'm stage 4 kidney disease, on the transplant list. If I lose this job, I lose the list. I lose Eli's coverage. I picked my son. I picked staying alive. I have been a coward. You were a mother. Yesterday I got my labs back. I'm progressing into stage 5. I'll need a transplant inside 6 months. If I give you this and they fire me, I come off the list. I die." Adeline took her hand. "I will sign a private indemnity today. Lifetime health coverage for you and Eli outside the Halverson system, drawn from my personal estate, before you hand me anything. So you know you're safe regardless of how this lands. You don't have to. I do, because if I lose, you should at least live." Tessa handed her the drive. The lawyers drew up the indemnity in 47 minutes. On her way out, Tessa met Marcus Quill in the elevator lobby. "Marcus," she said, "I just gave her something she shouldn't know I had. She's about to go to war with the board. You should know. Quill looked at her a long second. Daniel called me 48 hours before he died. He said if anything ever happened to him and Hazel needed Wesley Halloway, I had to make sure Adeline found him. I didn't know what to do with that for 14 months. I think I know now. He went up to her office at 8:30. You don't know this, but Daniel called me 2 days before the accident. He was preparing a class action against Vale, Greenwood, and Lyrinex. He had files. I never found them. The police said they burned in the car. She went still. You think the accident wasn't? He cut her off. I don't think anything I can prove. I just know Daniel was preparing to do what you are about to do, and he died before he finished. She drove home in the middle of the workday. She sat in her car in the driveway for 11 minutes. Then she went inside and climbed to the attic, the one place she hadn't opened since August. 3 cardboard boxes. She searched for 6 hours. She found it inside the back cover of his copy of Times, Sound Before Speech Times, a flash drive taped to the binding. On the drive, the case file Daniel had been building. 47 plaintiffs, families of children who had been put through compelled response at Greenwood and 3 affiliated institutions. Toby Reeves. 11 other children with documented psychiatric injury, the name of the Lyrinex executive who had signed the institutional contract. And the last email Daniel had sent Quill, dated August 14th, 2024. Asterisk Marcus, I'm filing Monday. If anything happens, make sure Adeline finds Wesley Halloway. He's the only expert who can testify to the opposing standard. He's in Asheville now building instruments. I've kept up with him. Daniel. Asterisk. Daniel had died 2 days later, a Friday afternoon on Interstate 40. He had been driving Mason to a soccer tournament for the weekend. The State Highway Patrol called it single vehicle, weather-related. She called Quill. I found the file. He was at the house in 35 minutes. He read it. He sat down very slowly at the kitchen table. Adeline, this is a $400 million class action. This is what Daniel died with, accident or not. We will probably never know. But this is a weapon. What do we do? He breathed out. 3 fronts. 1. Kill the Behavioral Institute contract inside the Halverson board this week. 2. File the class action publicly next month. 3. Stop HB 1247 on the floor in December. Each front needs different witnesses and different evidence. The Halverson board needs Wesley to testify to professional standards. His license is lapsed, not active. Is there a way to get it back fast? He thought. North Carolina General Statute 90-21.16. Expert reactivation under public interest emergency. If we petition the medical board citing HB 1247 as a statewide threat, they can reactivate emergency status in 7 days. But Vale sits on the review panel, unless we make him unable to sit. How? By delivering Tessa's tape to the State Bureau of Investigation today, he can't review a license while he's the subject of an active criminal probe. Quill nodded slowly. You're proposing we file with the SBI before the panel? Yes, today. That night, she drove to the workshop with the file. She put the drive on his bench. He did this. For you. Before he died. He had 47 plaintiffs. Wes read for a long time. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. He never told me. In every email we exchanged 2022 through 2024, he never mentioned it once. Because he didn't want you to carry it. He wanted to finish it before he handed it over. He set his hand on the drive. Then we finish it for him. At 11:47, her phone buzzed. The number was hidden. Asterisk, I hear you have a flash drive. Sunday, before the board meets, come to the Institute alone. If you don't, I'll be presenting the de-identified Halverson case file to the HB 1247 committee on Tuesday, selective mutism in an 8-year-old, network CEO's only surviving child, current patient. Half the press in Raleigh will run the math by lunchtime. You signed the standard treatment consent. I don't need your permission to discuss a de-identified case. Asterisk. She handed Wes the phone. He read it. He looked at her. He's not bluffing. The de-identification is paper thin. Anyone with a Halverson press release from the last 14 months can connect it to Hazel inside a day. He won't name her, he doesn't have to. He just has to leak the shape. Thursday morning, she called her personal attorney, Helena Voss. He's correct on the consent, Helena said. Standard pediatric treatment forms allow de-identified case discussion in academic and policy settings. To shut it down, you have to revoke the consent and document qualifying clinical justification, meaning a licensed expert on file documenting that the current protocol is causing harm. Without that, you can sue him after the fact. You can't stop him before. She needed Wes. Wes needed his license. The license needed emergency reactivation. Reactivation needed the medical board. And the medical board had Vail. Quill filed at 9 on Friday morning, attaching the Daniel file, the Tessa drive, and the SBI intake receipt already stamped. By 4 that afternoon, the medical board had issued an interim suspension of Vail's panel seat for active conflict of interest in a pending criminal investigation. The Wesley Halloway reactivation hearing was rescheduled to Monday morning at 8, without him. Saturday at the park, the maple leaves had gone red. Wes and Hazel sat at the base of the tree. He had let her hold his small carving knife, guiding her hand, teaching her grip. Adeline sat 2 meters away. "I had a daughter," Wes said quietly to Hazel. Her name was Iris. She liked carving. She died when she was 5. I couldn't save her. Hazel stopped the knife. She looked at him for a long second. She tapped 3 times on the wood. Asterisk. "I hear you. Asterisk. There's a man," he went on, "who is going to make you talk in front of a lot of people on Monday. Your mother is trying to stop him. I'm trying to help. There's one thing you could do. Only one, if you wanted. You don't have to. I will protect you no matter what you choose." Hazel listened. She tapped twice. Asterisk. "I don't understand." Asterisk. He nodded. "That's okay. I'll explain later." She reached for his hand. She put it on her chest. She tapped 3 times on the back of his hand. Asterisk. "I trust you." Asterisk. Adeline turned away so neither of them would see her face. Monday morning, Raleigh, the North Carolina Medical Board. Wes wore a suit he hadn't taken out of the closet in 3 years. Quill represented him. The session lasted 47 minutes. 4 panelists, no Vail, the Daniel file, the Tessa tape, the SBI receipt. The license was reinstated under emergency status, effective immediately, pending full review. He called Adeline at 9:42. "I have the license. I'll do the clinical evaluation this afternoon." 3 o'clock at the Halverson Clinic on Charlotte Street, Wes evaluated Hazel. 47 minutes. Not a treatment session, an assessment. Hazel cooperated. She knew him. She trusted him. Wes signed the report. Asterisk. Patient is exhibiting measurable neurological trauma response consistent with compelled response exposure. Medical recommendation. Immediate cessation of contact with Dr. Preston Vail. Recommended transfer to sound before speech protocol with alternate provider, asterisk. 6 o'clock, Halverson Board, emergency session. 11 members, Vail barred. Adeline presented the Daniel file, the Tessa tape, the Wes report, the SBI receipt. Robert Halverson sat at the far end of the table, first time he'd attended a board meeting since retirement. He didn't speak. When she finished, he nodded once. The vote was sealed ballot. She held Quill's hand under the table. Tessa stood at the back, her face still gray from her morning dialysis run. The result was 10-1. The single dissenter was a member Vail had quietly funded. The Behavioral Institute contract was killed. Halverson severed all ties with Vail's affiliates and committed to fund the legal fees of all 47 plaintiffs in the class action. Adeline stood up. She didn't cry. She called Wes. "It's done. Now HB 1247. 2 weeks later, Vail was federally indicted on healthcare fraud and child endangerment charges. He was out on bail, but HB 1247 was still alive. Vail had backers in the legislature, and the bill was nearing the floor. The class action was filed publicly. North Carolina media broke open. Tessa testified under Halverson's legal protection, her separate indemnity untouched. Eli was moved to a private adult services arrangement Adeline funded directly. No Halverson dependency. The bill needed a witness on the floor, a living patient who could speak to the harm. Wesley refused to let Hazel be that witness. She isn't ready. The sound before speech method needs 6 months minimum before a patient voluntarily phonates with strangers in the room. Adeline agreed. They found another witness. Toby Reeves's mother, Anna, agreed to testify about her son. Wes would testify to the standard. Thursday before the floor vote, at home, Hazel handed her mother a drawing. 3 figures under a maple. A woman with brown hair, a man in a green flannel, a small girl with blonde hair, all of them with faces, all of them smiling. The colors went off the edges of the paper, the way they used to before the accident. Hazel pointed at the girl with blonde hair. She whispered the first audible word in 14 months. Hazel, 1 word. Horse. Cracked. Adeline sat down on the floor. She didn't grab her daughter. She didn't want to flood the moment with reaction. She only whispered back, Hazel. The girl tapped 3 times on her mother's knee. Asterisk. I love you. Asterisk. After a long minute, Hazel went back to the table and picked up the green crayon. She started a new drawing. Adeline got up and went to the kitchen. She closed the door behind her. She leaned against the counter and shook for 40 seconds without sound. Then she washed her face at the sink and called Wesley. She just said her own name. He was quiet. When? Just now. Voluntarily. Pointing at a drawing of herself. That's step 1. There can be regression. Don't expect tomorrow. Don't tell anyone outside the house. Let her own it for a while. And Adeline Saturdays helped. But she picked you for the first word. That's how the method is meant to work. Friday morning. The state capitol in Raleigh, granite cold under early winter sun, Adeline brought Hazel not to testify. But because Hazel had asked, in 3 knocks on the kitchen counter at breakfast, she sat in the hall outside the chamber with Tessa, the wooden owl in her lap. Inside, Anna Reeves spoke about her son. About the day Toby came home from a session and wouldn't eat for 2 days. About the day she found his note. About hospital lawyers refusing to release the file. Wes testified next. He laid out times sound before speech, times against compelled response, the neurological studies, the Toby file, now unsealed. He didn't name the senator on the floor whom Vail had funded. He didn't have to. The cameras did it for him. The vote was 67 for 71 against. 4-vote margin. The bill failed. The chamber broke into noise. Adeline stepped out into the hall. Hazel saw her and ran the length of the marble. She wrapped both arms around her mother's legs. Hazel said, hoarse but clearer than the day before, Mom. Home. 2 words. Adeline sat down on the marble floor in her good coat and held her daughter. She cried for the first time in 14 months, not for losing Daniel, not exactly, but because Hazel had come back. She let him go. She let Mason go. She kept her arms around what was still here. Wes stood at the end of the corridor. He didn't move closer. The moment didn't belong to him. Tessa stood beside him and put her hand on his arm. You did what Daniel didn't get to finish. He shook his head. Daniel started it. I just closed it out. On the drive back to Asheville, Hazel slept in the back seat with the wooden owl tucked under her chin. Adeline drove. Wesley sat in the passenger seat. They didn't talk much. At a red light on the Boone exit, Adeline put her hand on the gear shift. He didn't pull away. She didn't grip. They just stayed there for 47 seconds until the light turned green. 4 weeks later, early December, Asheville had its first snow. Vail accepted a partial plea, 8 years federal lifetime license revocation, full cooperation with the SBI investigation into Greenwood and Lyrinex. The Lyrinex CEO was indicted 3 days later. The class action settled in principle for $312 million, divided among 47 families. Toby's mother put her share into a children's foundation she named for her son. The Reeves Center opened a small office in Charlotte that took its first 6 patients in November. Tessa got her transplant in the 3rd week after the bill failed 6 of 6 antigen match from a brain-dead donor on the registry. She had been called in at 2 in the morning. Adeline drove her to Mission Hospital and sat in the waiting room with Eli through 6 hours of surgery. The graft took clean. 3 weeks later, Tessa was walking the corridor with a cane, color in her face for the first time in 2 years. Eli was working part-time at the workshop on Riverside Drive. Adeline had arranged the schedule herself. Wesley was teaching him to tune violins. Eli had pitch-perfect hearing and remembered every adjustment by ear after a single demonstration. Halverson Pediatric Health announced a new fund, the Iris and Mason Initiative for Pediatric Trauma Care. $5.4 million across the first 3 years, dedicated to mutism and early trauma care under strict ethical protocol. The names of his daughter and her son together. Adeline didn't ask Wes first. She told him after she signed the paperwork. He came to the Halverson Tower. She was at the window on the 14th floor, watching the snow over Pack Square. The Christmas market was setting up below wooden stalls, white lights, the brass band beginning to tune. She handed him the prospectus. He read the title page and set it down on the credenza. He came over to stand beside her. He didn't touch her. You didn't have to. I know. Both names deserve a place that isn't a grave. He nodded. He took an envelope from the inside pocket of his coat. The paper was old and creased, the corners worn soft. This came to me last week. Daniel mailed it in May of 2024 to the post office box I used to keep. I never closed it out, just stopped checking. I didn't open it until last week. I think there are others. I haven't gone through them yet. She opened it. Daniel's handwriting. The blue ink of the pen he kept on his nightstand. Ves, asterisk. If you're reading this, I didn't get to send it by email. Maybe I was busy. Maybe I'm dead. Not impossible, given what I'm digging into. Asterisk. Asterisk, I want to tell you. You are not the reason Margaret took her life. You are not the reason Iris drowned. Vale is the first reason. The system is the second. You were just the man who tried to do the right thing. Asterisk. Asterisk, Adeline doesn't know I'm writing this. She doesn't know I'm building the case. I want to protect her until the last possible minute she's stabilizing the network, and I won't make her choose between me and her career. Asterisk. Asterisk. If something happens to me, she will find you. She's smart enough. She'll do the right thing. She'll just need time. Hazel will be the bridge. I taught her your system from the time she was 3. Asterisk. Asterisk. Don't turn her away if she comes. Don't tell yourself you don't deserve it. You've already punished yourself enough. Asterisk. Daniel. Adeline finished reading. She sat down on the windowsill. She handed it back to him. He knew. He always knew. Wes set his hand on her shoulder. The first time he had touched her for more than a second. His hand was warm through the wool of her sweater. He was a good man. He wanted you to keep going. She put her hand on his where it rested on her shoulder. She didn't turn around. The brass band below started a slow version of Times in the bleak midwinter. Asterisk. What do you want? He didn't answer right away. He looked out the window with her. I want pancakes with you and Hazel on Thursday. She's been waiting since last Thursday. Then I'm late. Thursday at 6. The house in North Asheville. Snow falling past the kitchen window. Yellow light on the counter. Wes arrived on time. He brought a small wrench, as a joke. A child-size 1/8 violin, not for Hazel to play yet, just to feel the wood and the weight. And a wooden duck. Hazel opened the door. Wes, come in. 3 words. Horse. He crouched to her height. Hello, pancake expert. He spilled the batter. Yeah, I figured. In the kitchen, 3 of them. Adeline at the pan. Hazel on a stool, mixing. Wes slicing strawberries. No Nina Simone. Hazel had picked the music, an old recording of a violin partita. She tapped 3 times in tempo with the bowing. Wes saw it. She had turned the language into play. At dinner, Hazel told them about her friend Mira, about a shopping trip the week before. She spoke slowly. Sometimes she stopped to find a word. Neither of them filled it in. They waited. After dinner, she fell asleep on the couch with the small violin across her chest, not strung yet. Adeline and Wes did the dishes side by side. Her shoulder against his arm. The Iris and Mason Fund is opening its first office in Charlotte next month, she said quietly. I want you on the advisory board, not as a treating clinician, just on method. You can say no. He set the towel down. I'm not saying no. That's once a month in Charlotte. It's 130 miles, 2 hours each way. I'll drive it. Quiet. Do you want to stay in Asheville? She asked. He looked at her. I stayed in Asheville for 3 years because it was where I went to hide. I'm staying now because there's an 8-year-old asleep on your couch, and her mother is standing 12 inches from me. She set the towel down, too. She didn't turn to face him yet. She spoke into the sink. Daniel wrote that I'd need time to find the right thing. Was he right? I'm still finding it. But I'm not finding it alone anymore. He turned her by the shoulders. He didn't kiss her. He set his forehead against hers and closed his eyes. They stayed like that 23 seconds. The radiator ticked. The snow fell. Hazel stirred on the couch and whispered something that was almost a word times dad times, and it wasn't clear whether it was Daniel or Wes or both at once. He stepped back. He set his palm against her cheek for 1 second. Saturday. The park? Saturday. The park. He went to the door. She stood on the threshold. He was on the path, his breath fogging in the December air. He turned back. Ah, Deline? Yes? Thank you for coming to the workshop that night. Thank you for fixing the swing. He smiled. He walked to his truck. She closed the door. She went over to Hazel and pulled the blanket up to her shoulder. On the side table, the wooden animals stood in a row. The rabbit Daniel had carved for her 6th birthday, the squirrel from the swing set, Birch the owl. Iris, the second rabbit, named the day Wes had told her the first time. The duck, still nameless. And now the small violin. On the wall, she had hung Hazel's drawing 3 figures under a maple. Beside it, in a small wooden frame Wes had made the week before, she had put Daniel's letter. She turned out the lamp. Outside the window, snow drifted past the bare maples. Inside, Hazel whispered something in her sleep, not a word, but a rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Adeline smiled. She climbed the stairs. She didn't cry. She slept.